The so-called politics of the California prison system, which is the largest in the country, as California is the largest state in the country, are really centered around two things: race and gangs. And there's a lot of YouTubers and other people talking about prison stuff, and California, you know, is number one on the list. And I thought it would be good to give a kind of a more accurate and general overview of the situation. So let's begin at the beginning and with black and white, Aryan Brotherhood and the black guerrilla family.
The guards at San Quentin have their own way of describing the mood of the inmates. They call it the climate on the inside. And this summer, the climate is hot. 1 white and 2 black prisoners have been killed. 14 inmates have been stabbed. And even moderate convict leaders concede the situation has sometimes become a race war.
It used to be a certain group against another group, you know, the Nazis against the Muslims. But now it's a black face against a white face, and everyone is a target.
Now, if you're a black man, it don't make any difference what clique you belong to. As long as you're black, you're going to get hit. If you're a white man, it don't make any difference what your age or what clique, you're going to get hit.
And in the late 60s, of course, desegregation is going on around the country, and that desegregation came to San Quentin and California State Prison as well, and it caused a lot of violence. And by the late 60s, you had, along with the Mexican gangs that had formed, we'll talk about those in another episode, you had the Aryan Brotherhood, which is ostensibly formed for the protection of white inmates, and the BGF, the Black Guerrilla Family, which at the very beginning it was intertwined with the Black Panthers and had a Marxist-Leninist ideology. The BGF would protect certain white radicals that came into California prison system, and its symbol is a dragon, I think, attacking a prison gun tower. So it was like an anti-government thing, you know.
But some accuse the prison guards of stirring up the race trouble, of sneaking in narcotics and weapons.
The police officers that work here bring their prejudice in from the street. The same guy that brings in dope, that will bring in any other thing, was the same guy that will bring in knives and supply it with other sides and keep this stuff going.
If you can live together, you live together, but when you got bulls telling you, get this black when it gets down, or another bull telling the blacks, get this white when you get down, you can't stop nothing.
Talking about guards.
I'm talking about guards, yeah, bulls, yeah.
But of course, as the years pass, society changes and the phenomena that are going on evolve, and those two groups have evolved. And there's so many different stories to tell. I'm just going to give kind of a selected highlight reel to give a flavor of the situation.
Well, sooner or later, and hopefully sooner, the inmates will come to the realization that they've got to live together. We have had the Ku Klux Klan or the Nazis and the black militants sitting down together and talking. We have done better than they have in civilization on the outside, I believe.
So the Aryan Brotherhood is probably kind of the most frightening set of people, or prison gang people, of all. A lot of them seem to be just into violence for violence sake. I mean, you can read quotes from many of them like that. And because they felt that the white inmates, there were less of them, they had to really set a mark of an intimidation through brutal murders. In the earlier years, a lot of those murders were of black inmates and etc. But in all their RICO cases in recent years and all the murder charges against Aryan Brotherhood members, most of them, certainly not all, are against other white inmates. Of course, the nature of white inmates is a little different than black and Latino. It's a little harder to go to jail as a white man in the United States. So who are the white men in maximum security prisons in California? Well, they're white inmates in general, in my experience, are a little more, it's a dichotomy. So you have a small amount of them that are like some of the most hardcore, serious inmates, troubled people, or people have chosen to live a life of crime and do a lot of serious things. And then you got a lot of people like everyone else, drug addicts, kids from some suburb who decided to break in some houses, and they find themselves in an environment which they have no context for which to deal with. And, you know, they seek out protection from people like Aryan Brotherhood or other prison gangs or people under their umbrella in California.
But here's where things get interesting. 13 of the people being indicted are female corrections officers. You know, the ones running the jail. The guards allegedly helped leaders of the Black Guerrilla family run their criminal enterprise in jail by smuggling cell phones, prescription pills, and other contraband in their underwear, shoes, and hair.
Today you might know of the BGF, or the Black Guerrilla family, as the California prison group allegedly, or in the context of Baltimore and Maryland, where they have a lot of power, and it's unclear how those two groups are related. And the Baltimore police says they're a street gang as well. There was a big indictment not too long ago, or a few years back, of a BGF leader in the Baltimore jail who I think he impregnated 4 different guards.
4 of those corrections officers became pregnant by one inmate in particular, one of them with 2 of his kids, while he was serving time behind bars. Another 2 got the inmate's name actually tattooed on their bodies.
They were flooding the jail with drugs, murders on the street. The FBI surveilled meetings in parks in Baltimore with 100 BGF members, you know, street gang members, you know, having outdoor meetings. It sounded like a scene from The Warriors. And how they're connected to the original BGF, boy, that's pretty complicated, and who knows what the truth is.
Mr. Wells? Mr. Mill? Mr. Skoll? And Mr. Lawford?
Now, the BGF was formed by George Jackson and a few others in the late 60s in San Quentin, and it was very political. While in prison as a young guy, George Jackson was appointed field marshal by the Oakland chapter of the Black Panther Party and was tasked with recruiting prisoners into the Black Panther Party. Communist ideology heavily informed the early BGF. I met Marx, Lenin, Trotsky, Engels, and Mao while in prison, George Jackson said, and they redeemed me. As a quick aside, there's also the issue of prison guards, and it's always said that, or I've heard it said many times, that like the white inmates, especially the Aryan Brotherhood, or even in the state of Michigan where I'm from, if you're in a place where there's a lot of white guards and not a lot of white inmates, it's said that the white guards will help the white inmates smuggle in weapons and other things. And one of the big incidents in the late 60s at San Quentin is tied in with this. There was a day where something like 14 black inmates and 2 or 3 white inmates were put out on the exercise yard and started fighting, and a white prison guard shot and killed 3 of the black inmates. So then a couple days later, a white prison guard was thrown off a tier at San Quentin to his death, and the people charged with the case, whose names were George Jackson, Fleta Drumgo, and John Cletchett. George Jackson, that's where he became, along with the others, known as the Soledad Brother. Soledad Brother was a book that a lawyer, white female lawyer, helped him get published that became a big cause célèbre and made him very famous. So George Jackson was ready to get out of prison by any means necessary, and his family was ready to get him out of prison by any means necessary. And let me set the scene of what's going on here in this 1969, 70, 70, 71. The National Guard is gunning down white students at Kent State. Black Panthers and other black militant groups are shooting white police and killing them in the streets, and sometimes going to court and getting acquitted. Things like COINTELPRO, the Chicago Police Department, executing the young leader of the Chicago Black Panther Party. There's a movie out about now. And so it was a very violent atmosphere, people killing police, getting away with it, police killing people and getting away with it. And so here we have at San Quentin, this violence is now in this prison atmosphere and is getting pretty intense. And George Jackson and his two cohorts that are alleged to have thrown the white prison guard off the tier at San Quentin, they're charged with murder. And George Jackson had a 17-year-old brother on the outs named Jonathan.
I think I would be the first to know if there was. I'm saying that there was no conspiracy, that Jonathan, a 17-year-old man-child, was working according to the dictates of his own mind.
Jonathan, with a gun registered to radical activist black female Professor Angela Davis, the gun was registered to Angela Davis. He storms the Marin County courthouse. Marin County is one of the richest counties in America now. It's up in the Bay Area. It's where San Quentin is. He storms the Marin County courthouse. He grabs a judge, tries to kidnap him. He's going to try to force, I guess, them to release his brother in exchange for the judge. There's a shootout. He's killed. George Jackson's brother is killed. Then I think there's a guard killed. There's some prisoners that were in the courtroom killed. Crazy, crazy scene. So that's 1971. Fast forward to 1972. There's this ongoing race war between the BGF and, well, it's not really between the BGF and Aryan Brotherhood. It's white people and black people in California prisons are killing each other. There's also stuff going on with the Hispanic inmates. So prior to George Jackson's brother Jonathan being killed in the courthouse attempted kidnapping and shootout, Jackson was already a celebrity from the publishing of his book, Soledad Brother, Letters from Prison. And this book had been kind of arranged and edited by his lawyer at the time, Faye Stender, a white female lawyer. She had gotten the French philosopher who was really famous at the time, Jean Genet, to write a foreword, and this book sold hundreds of thousands of copies, so the funds went to his legal defense and other people in custody. But Faye Stender then removed herself as his lawyer because she claimed George Jackson was pressuring her to bring a gun to prison in her briefcase, because lawyers aren't subject to the same sorts of getting checked as other people. And I remember I was in jail somewhere, and a guy always was high on heroin, and he was a sort of a celebrity, and I found out his lawyer was bringing him heroin all of his legal visits so he could spend his whole time in the county jail because he had a bad case, just high on heroin. So lawyers do that kind of stuff. So Faye Stender removed herself from the case. Stephen Bingham's the new lawyer. Stephen Bingham one day in 1972 comes to see George Jackson, and when Bingham leaves, Jackson has a .32 caliber automatic. He and 6 other inmates try to escape. There's some guards killed. George Jackson himself is killed. Stephen Bingham, the lawyer, goes on the run for about 13 years. He's eventually taken into custody, or no, he turns himself in, I think, in California in the mid-'80s, and he goes on trial and he's acquitted. And you might say, well, how was he acquitted? Well, the defense was that the guards, the white guards, actually gave George Jackson a gun so that they would have an excuse to kill him. And the jury believed that, and Stephen Bingham was found not guilty, and he ended up becoming, he got re-let onto the California bar, I think, not too long ago. And the Faye Stender saga does not end there either. The unraveling of the Black Panther Party in the 70s and late 70s and 80s, a lot of dark episodes, one of which in about 1980, a BGF or Black Panther member broke into her home and shot Faye Stender multiple times, and she was paralyzed, and after about a year of being paralyzed, she went to Hong Kong and killed herself. And the guy that shot her said that he did it because she had undermined the movement back in the early 70s. So pretty violent, dark situation all the way around. But prison is such a unnatural environment. That any weird thing that happens in there, or any weird thing it does to anybody's brain in there, really doesn't come as a shock to me. To have a bunch of men who don't know each other in close quarters with each other for years on end is so totally out of anything that our brains evolved to do. It's a wonder more and worse, weirder stuff doesn't happen than does. So there was a 16-month trial of what was called the San Quentin Six. Those were the 6 inmates who, along with George Jackson, who was killed, were part of the escape attempt. Several of them were totally acquitted. Now, one famous name you might know from the San Quentin Six, Hugo Yogi Pinnell, he became famous as a victim of human rights abuses in the U.S. prison system because he ended up spending 43 years in solitary confinement for his role in that. He was convicted of slitting the throat of 2 guards, though neither of them died. And so Yogi Pinnell was in solitary confinement from the early 70s all the way up until 2015, when he was let out, and within a couple days of being let out, 2 Aryan Brotherhood associates, who later in wiretaps, it was revealed, earned their shamrock. They became made men for the Aryan Brotherhood, stabbed him to death on the prison yard, which then set off a riot between white and black inmates, I think at New Folsom Prison, or Sacramento Prison. I think inmates call it New Folsom. It's technically Sacramento Prison, I think.
After 70 inmates rioted this afternoon, Betty Yu shows us when the dust settled, one of California's most notorious prisoners was dead.
His friends called him Yogi Bear, a name that hardly suggests the convicted rapist he was, or the convict who was part of the San Quentin Six.
Now, back to the Aryan Brotherhood. So, a guy named Ronnie Yandel, who's at the center of a 2020 California Aryan Brotherhood RICO case where they indicted a bunch of Aryan Brotherhoods that were already in the California prison system for running a big criminal empire with smuggled cell phones. Ronnie Yandel was on a wiretap telling, I think, a guy named Pat Brady in the AB that, yeah, he ordered the hit on, or sanctioned, he and others sanctioned the hit on Yogi Pinnell because he was known for saying derogatory things about white inmates, and Yandel is charged with that murder as part of his RICO charges. But now here's where, it starts getting even more complicated. Back in 2013, there was a big hunger strike, and there was inmates housed in the Pelican Bay SHU in an area called the Short Corridor, so it's known as the Short Corridor hunger strikes, and representatives of all 4 of the main California prison gangs, the BGF, the AB, Nuestra Familia, and La MA, Mexican Mafia, orchestrated, at least for a few days, 30,000 inmates in California prisons didn't take their meals. And then, of course, as time passed, it became fewer and fewer, but this group of hardcore guys in Pelican Bay and other SHUs, Folsom SHU is security housing unit, that's where all the validated gang members, the ABs, the BGF, had been slammed down forever. So the California Department of Corrections had a thing of, if you were a validated gang member, you go basically to the hole forever.
I mean, living years together with these other validated members of different races, and we come to find out we have a lot of things in common, and that we have similar upbringings and we went through similar things, and understood why we thought the way we did, and a lot of it was that we were manipulated by older people that you looked up to for one reason or another. And
so the hunger strike was all the different gangs and racial groups coming together to say, well, that's a human rights violation. You can't put a guy in a hole for 20 years and they barely have any human contact. So Ronnie Yandel was one of the leaders of this on the white side, the Aryan Brotherhood side, and it resulted in, there was an Aryan Brotherhood named Todd Ashker who wrote a federal complaint that actually won, and they had to end it. And so a lot of these guys, the gang leaders, got put back out into some form of the general population, or at least a little more access. And I mean, they didn't go to low security or anything, but they weren't now slammed totally down where the only other people they were interacting with were the other gang leaders. Like in Pelican Bay, every cell is, you know, serious people from each of the groups. And Ronnie Yandel then ended up getting indicted in 2020 along with others for reasserting the Aryan Brotherhood's dominance over the white population in the California prisons. They had a big meth ring. It generated a lot of money. I was just listening to a story on a great YouTube channel called Stories by a Current Prisoner, and there's a guy named Powder. I think he was in Public Enemy #1, Peni, a white street gang that became a prison gang that did the Aryan Brotherhood's bidding, and he was talking about being at a prison where an Aryan Brotherhood named Travis Burhop, who's part of this indictment for these exact charges, had some Hispanic workers that like were they weren't guards, but they like worked in the kitchen. And Travis Burhop's mother had married a Mexican, someone with the cartel connections, and he was giving kilos of Mexican mud heroin to these Hispanic kitchen workers, and they were bringing it in for the Aryan Brotherhood. So there were kilos of heroin and pounds of meth being brought into this one prison. Huge drug ring, and it's part of the indictment as well. And Yandel and others ordered a bunch of murders of whites and attacks on whites that were in. There were 4 white prison gangs: the USAS, United Society of Aryan Skins or something, Golden State Skins, the Wolf Pack, and maybe something else, that were trying to usurp the authority of the Aryan Brotherhood and the Nazi lowriders, and Public Enemy #1, who was kind of handling the Aryan Brotherhood's business on the main lines. So go check out Stories from a Current Prisoner. Lots of current prisoners calling in. They seem to be mostly from the quote-unquote special needs yards because they're gang dropouts, but they're the people that would know. A lot of them are doing all day or close to all day, Hispanic, white, black, and they're telling you the inside scoop, at least from their perspective. And always remember, with criminal things, there might not really be a truth because everyone has to withhold things or make themselves sound a certain way. But
in society, you have drama, you have politics, you have crime, you have across the board. The prison system is a microcosm of that. But you have, the difference is you have a bunch of convicted felons, right, who a majority of which come from the working class poor communities, had a hard life, probably involved in drugs.
Now, the BGF and the Aryan Brotherhood were born in California prisons, but there's federal branches of them as well, and there's also branches in different states. But the federal branches are separate but connected. Some of the same people that were there when those groups were started in California are now in the federal versions of them. And so we just talked about how the AB and the BGF and other groups combined in this hunger strike to get themselves out of the shoe. And in the AB indictment, the federal government alleges that the hunger strike was kind of a sham, and these guys would be snuck meals, and it was just a way for the leaders of all the prison gangs to get back onto the main line. I don't believe that. I mean, you know, it is legitimately human rights abuse to be put in isolation for that long. But, you know, people's motivations are complicated, and apparently when some of them got out, they did get back busy with criminal activities, but their RICO case is still ongoing, so it's all alleged at this point against the AB as far as these new charges. Now, On the federal side, back in 06, there was a massive, I think it was the biggest, oh, they always say everything's the biggest, but it was like it was the biggest death penalty RICO case ever in U.S. history, and it was against a federal Aryan Brotherhood, primarily led by Tyler Super Honky Bingham, who could bench press 500 pounds at the age of 60, and Barry the Baron Mills, the half-Jewish Aryan Brotherhood federal co-leader. And two of the murder charges in that case were of two black guys from Washington, D.C., who they refer to as the D.C. Blacks, in Lewisburg Federal Prison. And James Doc Holliday, who's a federal BGF high up, he actually got on the witness stand on behalf of the Aryan Brotherhood to state that at Lewisburg there were only 10 or less Aryan Brotherhoods, and that they were so outnumbered by the D.C. Blacks, D.C. Blacks are black inmates from D.C., which it's not a state, so there's no state prison. So they're the single largest kind of geographic and ethnic group in the federal prison system, and lots of people have bad things to say about them, but that's probably just because they're often the dominant group in any prison because there's so many of them. And so the BGF and the DC Blacks apparently don't get along in the federal prison system. And Doc Holliday testified that if the Aryan Brotherhood did kill some DC Blacks, it would have only been in defense, and that the Aryan Brotherhood tried to diffuse racial problems in Lewisburg because they knew the serious repercussions of any sort of race war. So you have a BGF guy kind of acting as almost like a character witness for Aryan Brotherhood in this case back then. But now Doc Holliday is a guy who, when he was in California State Prison, I think he got stabbed by the Aryan Brotherhood, and he stabbed out the eye of some other Aryan Brotherhood. So, he was no friend to the Aryan Brotherhood, but, it's pretty complicated in there. And Doc Holliday hails, I don't know if he's from there, but his cases were out of Pacoima. And Pacoima, if you ever wondered where rap manager Whack 100, who's a Piru, well, he's a Pacoima Park Piru, I think. And Pacoima's this little enclave of black population that's been a black area since, I think, the 40s, way out in the valley at the northern edge of Los Angeles. And Doc Holliday's and some of the BGF street cases for drugs and murder from the 70s and 80s were out of Pacoima, including a quadruple homicide. And one of the cases, Doc Holliday was in this big case with the guy Ray Browning in the late 80s. And Ray Browning had been charged in the late 70s with killing two people in Pacoima on behalf of Doc Holliday. But then the witness statement was thrown out because the witness only said he saw Doc Holliday after he'd been hypnotized by the state's psychiatrist. It's all pretty bizarre stuff. And Doc Holliday's been in prison along with Ray Browning since the late 80s for this big drug case. Big James, who I interviewed, my friend Jay Joger's cousin, was in the Ray Browning case. He mentions it. He doesn't really talk about the case. He just said he was one of the people indicted, and he did 20-some years on that case. You can check out some of his interviews. I'll put the links below. So right now there's an ongoing RICO case against California Aryan Brotherhood. The BGF kind of keeps a lower profile, it seems like. I don't know how active or what's going on with them, but maybe I'll be able to get somebody to shed some light on that soon. But both of these groups, this is a long, big history. In some ways parallel what's going on out in society. Maybe in the past they did. Now it's like prison. So many people in America have been to prison and are in prison that it's like its own world, but that world is now spilling out into the regular world, and and it maybe kind of happened in California first, where you had, you know, because when I was in jail in Arizona, I just, the whole racial division and all that, it just so artificial. And then I realized that, well, it's useful to the prison administration, because of course if inmates are fighting each other, they can't go after the administration. And if you think back to the birth of the AB and the BGF, late 60s, tremendous, not so much unrest between racial groups in America, the unrest was towards the elites, right? Remember, it was the white youth and the black youth. The Black Panther Party's mantra was all power to all the people. White power, black power, etc. It wasn't just black power, but then if you turn it into a race war, well, it's a race war between the non-elite whites and the non-whites, and meanwhile the elites are now spared from everybody else going after them. And you know, the Mexican mafia totally changed the landscape of Hispanic gangs in Southern California, and we'll go into that in another chapter. But the AB and the BGF, we'll see if you guys want me to go into more depth on this stuff, and if so, I'll get some people that can talk about it. Al Prophet, American Dope. It was the summer of 2016, and Ronald Renegade Yandel was feeling good, especially considering he was doomed to spend the rest of his life in a California prison cell.
So it's actually dumb to see us all as divided. Who's dividing us is the powers that be, the hidden hand. Some people call them the blue bloods and the secret society, but it truly is big pharma, agriculture, banking, and media. The same 1% of the families of the world control that, and they're the ones that are actually manipulating people and causing these that this is the most important thing, and that everybody needs to kill each other, and we need to fight when there's so much more important things going on. That's the whole thing, though. That's the illusion they want to create that cause everybody to hate each other, because you're not focused after that.
Prison officials, citing Yandel's membership in the Aryan Brotherhood, had just finished keeping him locked away in a modern-day dungeon for the prior 15 years. He had been serving a solitary confinement term in California's most notorious secure housing unit at Pelican Bay.
Security Housing Unit, also known as SHU. Inmates are sent here because of their behavior once in prison. Most are here for assaulting or killing staff or other inmates. Some are here for prison gang activity. Because of their behavior in prison, these inmates are the most dangerous in the California Department of Corrections.
But in 2015, after statewide hunger strikes and lawsuits challenging the use of solitary confinement for so-called gang leaders, Renegade Yandel was transferred to New Folsom Prison in Sacramento. For the first time in the new millennium, he had a cellmate, relatively easy access to other inmates, and he managed to get something else, a contraband cell phone, and with that he had the ability to reach like-minded gangsters throughout the California prison system and on the outs. And what followed, according to federal prosecutors, was an attempted takeover of the state prison system's other predominantly white gangs, which resulted in one of the biggest gang crime takedowns in California history. The indictment explained how at least one defendant was a direct beneficiary of the settlement through cash, and how another defendant, Kevin McNamara, an Orange County lawyer, allegedly met with prisoners to deliver contraband under his attorney-client privilege. The indictment stated that AB members conducted, quote, extensive widespread criminal activity from within California's most secure prison environments, unquote. It said contraband cell phones were used to coordinate distribution of drugs, not only in California, but in South Dakota, Missouri, and elsewhere. The illicit cell phones were also used to orchestrate violent crimes, including murder plots, both inside and outside of prison, and to arrange smuggling of other contraband. The indictment further described murders committed by AB members, included photos of bloody weapons and crime scenes. It's now the 2-year anniversary of that indictment, And Yandel, who was convicted of murder and manslaughter and a 2001 double homicide in El Sobrante, is still hanging loose. The other defendants include Daniel Troxel, Billy Sylvester, Brant Daniel, Travis Burhop, Michael Torres, Kristen DeMar, Justin Petty, and Donald Popeye Mazza of Public Enemy #1.
A prison-based hit, and according to court papers obtained by Fox 11, Donald Mazza is the man who was given the mission to murder. Racial loyalty tattooed on his chest. He is the reputed president of a white supremacist gang called Peni, or the Peni Death Squad. Inmate Mazza, known as Popeye, was released on parole. Detectives say within 5 hours of his release, Popeye was back in Orange County, seated inside a camper smoking methamphetamine with 2 accomplices and the hit victim, a gang dropout named Billy Ray Austin. According to this felony complaint, Dominic Rizzo, another Peni parolee, beat and held Austin as Popeye plunged a knife into him over and over again. Then, Popeye turned to witnesses and said, "Want some too,
This
punk?"
is far from the full lineup of the California AB, but represents the set of people caught up in this particular set of conspiracies, which alleged 5 murders, 4 murder plots, prison drug trafficking, and other crimes. Prosecutors allege Yandel and Troxel were part of the 3-man commission that runs the California wing of the gang. Troxel, who's 66 and is serving a life sentence for murder, is the guy who wrote the federal complaint in '09 that eventually led California to curb the use of shoe terms, and he was leader of the hunger strikes and the end of hostilities that went on over the last few years. Cases this large always move slowly. Now, one of the indictees, Michael Torres, is a La MA member, and he's accused of heroin trafficking, and he moved to become his own attorney, which gives him increased access to case evidence. The case against the California AB, like most RICO cases, is largely built on wiretaps, but with the twist this time. The wiretaps was Ronnie Yandel's prison cell phone, in which he allegedly discussed previous murders that were committed on behalf of the AB, coordinated drug deals, and, quote, counseled, mentored, controlled, berated, and plotted to kill other members of the gang. Prosecutors say Yandel spoke of wanting to, quote, build an army within California's prisons and forming a new Aryan Brotherhood composed entirely of hardened killers with plans to force rival white gangs across the state to bend down. He is accused of recruiting members of Public Enemy #1, Peni, a white supremacist gang whose founder, a guy named Devlin Gazoo Stringfellow, was stabbed to death in 2018 on a yard controlled by the AB. Yandel is the one who told the others he learned that 4 white supremacist gangs, the United Society of Aryan Skinheads, the Wolfpack, the Golden State Skins, and the American Front, had formed a secret alliance against the AB, and that set in motion a war against them for control of white inmates in the California Department of Corrections. The 143-page indictment alleged that Yandel used the prospect of AB membership or increased stature within the gang to convince others to commit murders. 5 murders were actually included in the indictment, but 4 more were stopped by the wiretap, and the would-be victims were rescued and moved into protective custody. While the AB has an alliance with the Mexican Mafia and is a rival of various black groups, along with northern Hispanics, all but one of the murder conspiracies alleged in the case were a result of internal politics. The only outside murder was that of Hugo Yogi Pinell, an old-school BGF member who held the dubious distinction of having served more time in solitary confinement than any inmate in California history, before the AB took him out not long after his release from solitary.
To be, in the eyes of the public, by the department, to be the most dangerous prisoner in the state of California, you see. But now I find myself being the most endangered prisoner because of the circumstances that have been built around me.
Pinell was assassinated by 2 AB associates. He was a well-known prisoner in international rights circles and was a member of the so-called San Quentin Six, the group said to be behind a 1971 riot and escape attempt at San Quentin, which left 6 people dead. Pinnell had personally worked with BGF founder George Jackson. Pinnell was targeted, according to the complaint, because he frequently aired racist opinions towards white inmates, which made him a high priority target. And the complaint says that the two guys who did the attack, one started stabbing Pinnell, ignored smoke grenades, and that the other guy joined in and finished him off, stabbing Yogi 20 times. The attack kicked off a riot between black and white inmates at the Folsom Yard, which lasted 30 minutes.
New Folsom Prison near Sacramento is under extra close watch tonight after 70 inmates rioted this afternoon.
Today, in the exercise yard at New Folsom Prison, another con shanked him, and he died. The prison says Hugo was definitely the target.
His family is devastated by this.
A year later, Yandel allegedly discussed the murder in a 20-minute phone call with AB member Pat Brady, who was at High Desert State Prison and who also had a cell phone. Yandel admitted to Brady that the AB had Weaver, quote, kill that N-word Yogi, and that the AB members had been trying to kill him for years. Weaver, Yandel said, one of the hitters, earned his rock, meaning a shamrock tattoo signifying Aryan Brotherhood membership. So by committing the deed, a dead BGF meant a new AB. Hard to believe that this beef, which goes all the way back 50 plus years, is still going strong. Makes you wonder if it will ever end. Back in the late 60s, it probably would have seemed improbable that the California prison system would have changed so little in the next half century, while society outside it changed so much. Or has it? But that's a question for another day. Now, the AB is still as hardcore as ever, as evinced by what Brant Daniel said moments after using a shank to murder Zachary Scott on a yard in Salinas Valley. I hit him so hard the knife went in his back and out his chest. Brant Daniel also allegedly told the guard he was targeting another inmate who had recently been moved to protective custody. And as the guards rolled him out after the stabbing, Daniel allegedly yelled out that the other white inmates had better get off this weak-ass PC yard in 2 weeks, or another AB sanction hit would take place. Now here's where the case takes on a very interesting and another disturbing component. If you think these guys aren't smart, you're very wrong. And along with that intelligence of the leaders of almost any of the large prison groups comes the ability to strategize and carry out elaborate plans over long time periods, which is something our politicians in the real world can't seem to do very often. In the indictment, the federal prosecutors spend several pages blaming a settlement in a federal lawsuit for changes in California prison policies on housing these dangerous gang members in solitary. Now that settlement, it was a 2015 case filed by AB member Todd Ashker along with Danny Troxell. The other AB member was blamed for creating a, quote, growth opportunity for the gang because it required Aryan Brotherhood members to be released from the Pelican Bay SHU. The enterprise has experienced a significant resurgence within California state prisons. That's what the prosecutors said was the result of that settlement. So let's go back for some clarity in history. The AB was fully defined and in action by the early 70s as part of the violent era when the BGF, La MA, and NF started vying for control of, it seems to me when it all boils down to it, control of drugs and extortion rackets in the prison system, which is worth tens of millions of dollars a year in clear profits. And I'd imagine they control tobacco and cell phones now. And by control, I mean they usually let whoever do whatever as long as they break off the customary 1/3 of the action. Sounds a lot like the plaza system of the Mexican cartels. But anyways, in the mid-'80s, the AB and leaders of the other groups were slammed down in the SHU basically forever. And slowly their power dissipated to a degree, though later groups like the Nazi lowriders and eventually Public Enemy #1 would ally with the ABs, directing traffic from the SHU and do their bidding in the regular prisons. And to show you how structured and serious the P9 and AB alliance was, there was an episode of Gangland that featured P9. And one of the members, who probably just wanted to be on TV or to see himself on TV, because that's how those network shows get people. They pay you by letting you be on television. Trust me, Gangland and other shows have tried to work me a few times. Basically, he just talked vaguely about the gang's existence with his face in shadows and his voice distorted. But there was a dog or something behind him, and other members figured out who it was from seeing, I think, the dog. And if I'm remembering correctly, a P9 member was sent to kill him, and I think that killer got made into the AB as a reward, allegedly, supposedly. But as the feds pointed out, with the settlement, the California Department of Corrections had to let out the leaders of the security threat groups, and the AB was able to start handling its own business again. This same settlement is what got Yogi Pinnell out of the hole after nearly 50 years. And despite a, quote, end of hostilities between racial groups being a part of the deal for the leaders to get out, the AB is alleged to have quickly moved to take out old BGF stalwart Yogi Pinnell. Some hostilities only end the hard way, I guess. And in 2018, one of the founders of Public Enemy #1, most of whose members in prison were made into ABs, a guy named Devlin Gazoo Stringfellow, was stabbed to death by two guys, Jacob Kober and Stephen Dunkhurst, who were either ABs or probably were trying to get made as ABs. And perhaps the ABs were letting the new guys know the old guys were still in charge, or maybe Gazoo had messed up something serious. At the end of 2020, the feds got a big break when one of the RICO defendants, a guy named Samuel Keaton, decided to play Let's Make a Deal. According to his plea agreement, between March 2016 and at least October of 2016, Keaton, quote, knowingly associated with the AB and knew that the group regularly engaged in a pattern of racketeering activity that included murder, assault, conspiracy to commit murder, and drug trafficking. The settlement that resulted in the permanent placements in the SHU happened in 2015, so it looks like the AB had hit the ground running. As soon as they got out, they were doing stuff. Samuel Keaton, who's 41, he just pled guilty before a U.S. district judge to a count of conspiracy to participate in a RICO and conspiracy to distribute meth and heroin. Now, Keaton had been being held without bail in the Sacramento County Jail since June of 2019, facing those charges as part of the Aryan Brotherhood indictment. But I would imagine he's been moved, and he's probably going in witness protection. And he's the first defendant to enter a guilty plea in a case that federal officials have described as, quote, a major blow to the Aryan Brotherhood, a group that prison officials say orchestrated murders from their prison cells and oversaw a huge drug operation in California state prisons. He admitted that on July 11th, 2016, he delivered at least 100 grams of heroin to a woman named Gina Quisenberry in Sacramento on behalf of Yandel and the AB. And then on August 11th, that he picked up some meth and took it to somebody, and all those drugs went into the California prison system. And 100 grams of heroin is worth a lot of money. And he was assisted by a guy named Kevin McNamara, who was an attorney operating out of Southern California. And Keaton said he also picked up drug money on the outs for the AB. The guilty plea came a week after authorities announced they had made 102 arrests in the Fresno area of suspected Aryan Brotherhood associates and members in the Fresnex gang.
In January of this year, the Fresno County Multi-Agency Gang Enforcement Consortium and the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, or ATF, started investigations into the Fresnex criminal street gang. The Aryan Brotherhood prison gang and the Fresnex have a long and well-established history, and both have proven to be violent organizations with significant resources, which allows them to purchase, possess, and distribute firearms and controlled substances. They are also responsible for home invasion robberies, murders, kidnappings, as well as large-scale identity theft and other violent crimes within the county of Fresno as well as throughout California.
And during a news conference, representatives from Fresno state and federal agencies announced that those 102 arrests had been made against members, and they seized 47 firearms, 89 pounds of meth, 5.5 pounds of heroin, that's a lot of drugs, and $136,000 in cash. The Fresnecs are part of the little-known, outside of the West Coast, Peckerwood gang world that I think are descendants of the people known as Okies who came out to California from the Dust Bowl. And there's not a lot of major criminal groups that haven't been publicized and monetized, and especially for me, and the Peckerwood gangs are something kind of new and interesting. So if you want to hear more about the Fresnecs, let me know. But that's the current state of the 2019 AB California indictment. The first domino just fell, and it'll be interesting to see what happens next. Al Prophet, American Dope.
Listen, I got freedom right here. I got life in prison. You know, I'm not a punk little guy that you can smack around all the time. You better get off my case, Crutch. You got something coming, you keep messing with me. And they're just that fuel of the flame, they just wouldn't listen. They come back and laugh at me. It's just a personal thing with me and him.
Let us look now at how an individual can be lost from us, and immature experiences, even such a beginning as this one.
The year is 1975, the month is April. The future terrible Tommy Silverstein, his cousin, and his own recently paroled father put on blackface makeup, don afro wigs, and walk into 2 different banks in Long Beach, California with shotguns. Their total haul for both robberies is $4,001.
What you have just seen are films made by hidden motion picture cameras during actual bank robberies. The cameras were generally turned on by the same switch that activated the silent alarm during the course of the robbery.
In a few days, the FBI showed up at the future terrible Tommy's mother and stepfather's house, and they turned him and his father in. And in a couple more days, after her son's in custody, Tommy Silverstein's mom caused the FBI to inquire if she was entitled to any reward money. Within 10 years of his arrest, Tommy Silverstein would become the infamous man in the iron cage, the Aryan Brotherhood leader kept in the most restrictive prison conditions ever created in the United States, and it lasted for 40 years. His punishment for many people while in prison, the last being a guard at the Marion United States Penitentiary. Not long before that, at the same place, he had murdered 2 black prisoners at that same prison where he'd been sent from some white inmates at Leavenworth.
I understand you're not from a large city area. Are you from a farm or a small town?
Small town.
What part of a small town? The so-called good side of the tracks or the other side?
The other side.
When you say the other side, exactly what do you mean? What was wrong over there?
Well, where all the guys get in trouble all the time.
You mean the police were down there all the time?
That's right.
And you were raised in that particular area, is that right?
That's right.
A quote from a song: "All my life, I've always been so blue. Born to lose, and now I'm losing you." Born to lose was a popular saying and tattoo amongst hillbilly, greaser, Peckerwood, low-end white types back from after World War II.
But a man could have gotten killed in a motel robbery. What about that?
He got killed.
Didn't make any difference to you?
That's right.
Why?
Wouldn't nobody worry about me if I got killed or anything. So I don't worry about anybody else. If I'd killed him, it'd just been another death to me, is all.
From high in the hills, the city below looks like any other sprawling metropolis. Yet this one is different. For this is fabulous Hollywood.
February 1952, a child is born, Thomas Edward Conway. This was terrible timing, and he picked up the name Silverstein from his stepfather years later, but he was born Thomas Edward Conway to a mother named Virginia and a father named Thomas Valentine Conway. They were two Okies in the underbelly of post-war Los Angeles, film noir. Virginia was 20 years old and wanted to be a Hollywood movie star, and Tommy Silverstein's dad came from a criminal family near Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, what were Okies, you might ask? It was originally a derogatory name for poor farmers who fled the Dust Bowl of Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, and other plain states during the 1930s as a biblically destructive drought and sandstorms turned vast swaths of the central United States uninhabitable.
Going out to California. Your folks, my folks, everybody's folks.
But back to Tommy's mother, Virginia Conway. Virginia Conway wanted to be famous.
For this is fabulous Hollywood. It's the exciting city of 1,000 exciting sights.
She was living in Hollywood, but she was from somewhere else, and she was married to an Okie. And like many people sick for fame, even now, she was willing to degrade herself in public if that meant she would get some notoriety. Beat her, but she still loves him. That was the headline of the Hollywood Citizen News. Thomas Conway had beaten his wife, described as a pretty blonde, aspiring actress, so bad she was in the hospital to get surgery to reattach her ear. Now, when her husband, Tommy's father, went in front of the judge, she leapt to his defense, explaining that her husband simply slapped me around to knock some sense into me after she got rowdy at a Hollywood bar. She told the judge she needed her husband home to help with her 5-month-old baby, the baby that would grow up to be Tommy Silverstein. And her husband got let off the hook. Virginia, at the worst, tried to run Thomas Valentine, Terrible Tommy's father, over with a car, and she got charged with attempted murder, and there's a bunch of drama with them in and out of court and on the front page of newspapers. But let's suffice it to say, the initial stage of their romance ended when Terrible Tommy's father apparently did a couple successful stick-ups for once and gave Virginia the money. She bought a small house down in Long Beach, and he fled. He went back to the hills of Oklahoma where his family was, and he managed to stay hidden for maybe a couple years, but he ended up drawing a 16-year term in the infamous Oklahoma State Penitentiary. According to Tommy Silverstein and some court records, his mother, Virginia, was diabolically abusive to him. I won't get into some of the stuff she did. You can read it in Pete Early's book, No Human Contact. But eventually she married a decent guy, a guy named Silverstein, a Jewish guy who had moved from New York. He was like a factory worker here in LA. He didn't particularly have money, but they seemed to settle into kind of a post-war working class, upper blue collar kind of lifestyle. And Tommy was okay for a couple of years when he was young, but his mother's beating started to get to him. By 7th grade, he had turned mean. He was fighting with his stepfather and his mother. He started punching his mother in the face on occasion. Good for him, I say. And by 10th grade, he was stealing cars and going to juvenile.
Even such a beginning as this one, where one day he and some friends are merely playing hooky, truant from school, and here someone reports him. The juvenile officer appears, takes him out of the movie, back to his school or his home, and what seemed to have been an innocent prank has now begun to give him a character, a meaning, his experience, which never existed for him, but which now exists because society has taken a view of his act.
Now, the Los Angeles juvenile detention system was the first place Tommy Silverstein really interacted with black, I guess probably Hispanic people too. And already at that point, in the late 60s, Of course, the Aryan Brotherhood had already formed, a Mexican mafia had formed, a black guerrilla family had formed, and this racial stuff had trickled into the juvenile systems, and Tommy's, you know, first interactions with black people was violent. He ends up hitting a black guy in the face with a lock and a sock, and then he gets jumped on by a bunch of black guys, and then he gets lightning bolts tattooed on his neck right there in juvenile. So already, again, you can see the influence coming from the prisons.
But now it's a black face against a white face, and everyone is a target.
Now, if you're a black man, it don't make any difference what clique you belong to. As long as you're black, you're going to get hit. If you're a white man, it don't make any difference what your age or what clique, you're going to get hit.
Time he gets out, he gets a girlfriend, they move in. Mind you, he's still only like 17. His parents are helping him out with the rent. This is the time when the Hells Angels are coming heavily on the scene. A Hells Angel just shows up at their house one day and like moves in. He starts sleeping on the couch. They're scared to put him out. Then after about a week, he goes into the bedroom and decides he's going to take over Tommy's girlfriend, but this was a bit too much for him. They fight, but Tommy had enough sense to take his girlfriend and leave, and of course a bunch of Hells Angels showed up and destroy the rented home. So now Tommy has a warrant out for him, but he did catch the Hells Angel in a bar. They brawled the Hells Angels, stabbed him above the eye actually. So his violence now has gone from family violence to fighting in juvenile, beating up kids in high school, to before he's 18, he's in knife fights with Hells Angels in bars. So he gets real serious real fast. He's out stealing beer with one of his Okie aunts. They get caught by the police. The aunt, tries to jump on the police to defend her nephew or whatever. Police beat Tommy and his aunt so badly they have to hide them for 4 days in the LA County jail before presenting them to a judge because they're all lumped up. So now Tommy's out of jail again. At this point, it's about 1970, 71. He's picked up an H habit. He's living with his girl and the baby. He's doing robberies for H. His girlfriend is very violent. There's a very violent story she tells. I'll leave it if you want to read it in Pete Early's book. But Tommy was getting pretty dark. At one point, the baby was crying too much, and Tommy put his hand over the baby's mouth and pinched the baby's nose. He claims it was because that's how his mother taught him to shut up a baby. But the baby's mother, his girlfriend, pulled a butcher knife, got Tommy off of him. He said the only two people he was ever afraid of was his mother and the mother of his daughter. And then, so there in the early 70s, Tommy's father finally gets out of Oklahoma State Prison, and he shows up and rekindles the father-son bond, much for the bad for Tommy. And like I said, they start doing bank robberies. They quickly get caught. Now, Tommy's mother, Virginia, when she was beating him and putting marks on him, had always taught Tommy to never rat, never snitch, never talk to the police. And when the FBI cuffed Tommy Silverstein up that day in 1975, again, thanks to his mother who taught him never to snitch to police but turned him in, it would be the end of freedom for the rest of his life. But he began his penitentiary career in the infamous San Quentin in the mid-70s when San Quentin was.
Oh, we just had a couple of more yards around. You hit, we got one sale, I think.
First day I walked in here, I thought somebody had made a mistake. And I said, where am I? You know, I've done a lot of time previously, and I wasn't used to coming in an environment like this. 2 people got killed here the first week I was here.
So Tommy Silverstein starts his prison career with a couple-year bit at San Quentin, which he has to serve before he goes to the feds for the bank robberies. He gets there in 75, and San Quentin was coming off one of the deadliest eras of any prison system in the country between 69 and 72. The race wars between the BGF and the Aryans, and then also the conflict between the Western Familia and Mexican Mafia had left over 70 people dead by stabbing. It was still very violent when he got there in 75.
More than 3,500 inmates, many of them considered among the most dangerous in the nation, crammed into century-old facilities designed to accommodate only 2,700.
He found himself, at least for a time, suspected in the death of a guard. He was never charged with that. He went to the hole and he was with a guy named, so ironically, Stephen Loser Clark. Loser was already in the AB and he got Silverstein involved in that. Now, Loser was killed not long after that by a guy named Clifford Smith, another early AB. Clifford Smith ended up dropping out in debriefing. He testified in the 03 to 06 RICO, where Bingham and Barry Mills and some others faced a death penalty. Clifford Smith said he killed 21 people himself. Now, even if he's exaggerating, gives you a sense of the violence of these guys. They sound like serial killers. So Loser brought in Terrible Tommy. Clifford Smith killed Loser. Clifford Smith drops out. So he finishes up at San Quentin and he starts his federal term at Leavenworth. He had 15 years. Back then, I think you got eligible parole after 1/3. So he probably wasn't looking at that much more time. But within about a year or so of being at Leavenworth, he's accused in a homicide. Him and his cellmate Edgar the Snail Heavily, who was, when he went on trial in 06, he was said to have been at one time a member of the Federal Aryan Brotherhood Commission with T.D. Bingham and Barry the Baron Mills. There's an inmate named Atwell, who supposedly they were pressuring to bring in drugs for the whites. Blah, blah, blah. He gets stabbed, and Silverstein's convicted. Now, ironically, and this led to him being transferred to Marion, USP, where, of course, his most infamous crimes occurred. Now, ironically, the case against Silverstein and Heavily for killing this guy Atwell at Leavenworth, after a couple of years, it got thrown out because, wow, they probably did do it. I mean, somebody did it. The guards and the prosecutors manufactured a lot of evidence, and it was thrown out in the early 80s. But, of course, by this time it was too late because he did what he had done at Marion already. Now, in interviews, Silverstein would always claim he did all the homicides he did in prison as basically self-defense or proactive self-defense. But there's a lot of evidence that the homicide that actually Barry the Baron Mills got his federal life term for was done at the behest of Silverstein. There was a guy named John Marsloff who burned Silverstein on an H deal, a small H deal. All these H deals were small. And he was down at Atlanta USP. He gets a letter from Silverstein, or I'm sorry, Barry Mills, who was in Atlanta, gets a letter from Silverstein telling him what Marsloff did. Barry the Baron Mills recruits a guy named Danny Holliday to help him. Holliday watches out while Barry Mills basically this guy's cabeza off at Atlanta USP, and Holliday ended up turning state's evidence against Barry Mills, and he got transferred to Montana State Prison to finish his time, and he did about 10 years there. But in 91, there was a riot at the Montana prison, and the inmates there got into the PC area where Holliday was at, and 5 people in PC were, including Holliday, who had an electrical cord put around his, and he was tossed over the second tier. So that's what happened to the guy that testified against Barry Mills to get him his life term. But the crime itself of Marsloff was probably done at Silverstein's behest. So Silverstein was probably ordered hits and maybe some other ones too. Now, remember that I said Silverstein tossed out, except by that time he had done what he had done at Marion. So he gets to Marion, and of course there's people, the Washington, D.C. inmates, who most of whom refer to themselves as Moorish Americans. They don't call themselves the D.C. blacks, but for lack of a better term, some of the black inmates from D.C., they were already at it with the AB, and a guy named Steamboat, who was a convicted, according to Pete Early's book, he was a convicted predator within prison. He ends up getting killed by Silverstein and another guy.
He was the most physically fit man I'd ever seen in my life. He impressed me as an individual who you want to stay completely away from.
And then there was a guy named Chappelle who was down with the DC guys. He got garroted while laying in his cell with his head too close to the bars, made a fatal mistake, and then, of course, the infamous incident between him and Cadillac, where they had been threatening each other for a while, and Silverstein ended up getting Cadillac. So that's 3 homicides of, I don't know if all the guys, I don't know if Chappelle was from DC, but he was down with the DC guys. The guys Steamboat and Cadillac were from DC and supposedly were cousins. So he had 3 more bodies in there. But again, at this time, even if you were sentenced to life in prison, which he wasn't, the feds had to give you a parole hearing every 10 years. So who knows, he might have got out until he started getting into it with the guard named Klutz.
And anybody that is in that adjustment center, right now ain't got nothing going for them. And I mean nothing. They're dead as far as the world is concerned. As far as this institution is concerned, they're buried.
All of us in this room probably couldn't live long enough to do the time he had. So he had nothing to fear by killing Gene Klutz.
He freezes. He's just standing there looking at me. I just go all the way off. I just start stabbing him. I'm not hearing nothing. All I see is his hands moving and me stabbing. It's just everything just goes plain.
I don't think there's any question that it's a form of slow torture.
Marion is a mind control prison where your human spirit is not meant to survive. Your human spirit is meant to be broken.
In interviews with Pete Early, author of Hot House and No Human Contact, which I got a lot of the information that I condensed this story from, he says basically, I can't believe they did to me what they did. But it's interesting, a lot of criminals don't seem to have, well, good, serious criminals, any real sense of how other people think. That they can do anything they want, but that some sort of rules are supposed to be followed for them, even though he took out a guard. But what they did to him was pretty awful. I think it definitely constitutes cruel, unusual punishment, but from some people's perspective, so what? They built him his own isolation cell where the lights never went off. They bothered him with noise. He wasn't allowed to send letters, get a visit. For some years, he didn't even have a pencil, a writing utensil, or anything. Hard to believe he didn't go totally crazy. He must have only been sustained by his hatred.
We turn now to the story of the Cuban prisoners who are holding hostages at this hour in 2 federal detention centers. As we reported earlier, Cuban refugees rioted and took hostages at the Atlanta detention center today.
Eres la Garda Assassinina? Are you the guard assassin? These were the first words Tommy Silverstein heard from anyone other than the occasional guard in 1987. He was in his cage where the lights never went off in Atlanta USP when, boom, the Cubans who were incarcerated there, it had been 6-7 years they had been in different U.S. prisons after Castro sent them over and the Mario boat left. Well, they took over the prison and they go and get Silverstein.
Okay, we have no intention to hurt nobody.
But that night, inmates take another 25 hostages in the prison hospital. The total now stands at 94, and negotiations remain stalemated.
He knew who he was. They let him out of his cage. He's suddenly free. He's roaming around the prison, and they take him to where they have the guards hostage. And, of course, they must have expected him to terrorize or do worse to the guards. But he didn't really do much to him. In fact, he sort of saved him because he told the Cubans, well, if you start taking these guards out, it's going to be even worse for you in the end. Silverstein started acting as the negotiator, or one of them, for the Cubans. But Silverstein was actually a topic of concern for the FBI and the Bureau of Prisons camped outside, and the Cubans cut a side deal. and they put tranquilizer in Silverstein's meal one night and then jumped on him and tied him up to deliver him to the feds, because the feds were like, well, we want Silverstein, because they were very afraid what he was going to do to guards, even though he hadn't done anything to any guards during the riot. And the very people that the Cubans were rioting against, they cut a deal with him and turned Silverstein over to them. Silverstein says he remembers asking them as they carried him out, the Cubans, I mean, end me, unalive me now. I don't want to go back into custody, but they didn't do him that solid. They turned him back over to the feds, and he was right back in his special cage. And if he thought that him maybe talking the Cubans out of doing anything to any of the guards would have helped his security level come down a little bit, it did not. Now, like I said, Pete Early, the journalist, did a book called Hot House about Leavenworth, where he first introduced the world to Silverstein, and then he followed up with the book No Human Contact about Silverstein and Clayton Fountain. Hot House made Silverstein, I don't know if celebrity is the right word, but a cause de celeb in the international prisoner rights movement. He started getting mail. There was at least a little bit of attention on him.
Inmates are sent here because of their behavior once in prison. Most are here for assaulting or killing staff or other inmates. Some are here for prison gang activity.
At some point in the early 2000s, Silverstein gets transferred to the Florence ADX, the Supermax in Colorado, which was kind of built as a response to what him and Clayton Fountain did that day back in 1983 against those two guards. Clayton Fountain was found dead in his own cell in 2004. But Tommy had another 15 years to go after that, all at the Florence ADX. The point of the story is that I've been thinking about, as the white population of the United States, the lower, say, half of it or so, seeing a lot of its social and economic status dissolve for various reasons, while we're seeing the same things happening in that part of the white population has happened in minority populations. The men don't have work. Some of them get into crime. And I thought the Tommy Silverstein story, though it's the most extreme, you know, if we start having more and more hardcore white inmates, maybe groups like these white prison gangs and people like Tommy Silverstein will become more prevalent. But the problem is, I mean, white people are by far the largest chunk of population in the United States. So if you have a substantial portion of them getting involved in street life, prison gangs, being Tommy Silversteins, it's going to be a difficult genie to put back in the bottle.
A man who is part of the reason the Supermax prison was built has died.
67-year-old Thomas Silverstein died this month. He was in intensive care following a surgery earlier this year. Silverstein went to prison back in '78 for armed robbery. He was later found guilty of killing a prison guard and 2 inmates at a federal pen in Indiana. Well, those murders inspired the design of the Supermax prison here in Florence, Colorado. Silverstein was moved there in 2005. It's believed he spent more time in solitary confinement than any other federal inmate. He was in solitary at various prisons since 1983.
I referenced the song Born to Lose by Ted Daffin earlier. Ted Daffin followed up that song with Pistol Packin' Mama. This was called Hillbilly Music at the time. Ironically, it was on the same record label, Okie Records, as they put the black music, the race music. So the Jewish and white record company owners considered the music of the poor white people and the music of black people to be part of the same genre, which in a sense I guess it is part of what hillbilly music was morphed into what we call country music. But you know, really, it's interesting that outpouring of the popularity of hillbilly music. Pistol Packin' Mama went #1 on the charts because you never did, and still less so now. You don't see a lot of the bad, troubled behavior and criminality amongst the lower end of the white population in the United States, though there's plenty of it. Whereas, of course, as we know, criminality amongst African Americans especially is sanitized, glamorized, and is frankly one of the key sources of our entertainment culture, which is pretty disturbing. Now, Tommy Silverstein, given the amount of death he inflicted on those around him, I don't think he's someone to per se feel sorry for at all. nor somebody that's very likable or that would have been your friend if you met him. And he's just a very extreme example, but these are the stories probably that aren't glamorous and at least, or don't have the superficial glamour that stuff from the ghetto, because we're shown a sanitized version of that in movies and rap videos. Poor white people with terrible lives who turn out to be prison killers. Well, that's not probably too exciting to anybody, and it's hard to package that up into a product and sell it. And yet, as these statistics show, more and more white people going to prison, the lower ends of the white population. And by low, I don't mean they're less of human beings, but the less educated, the people from the lower income brackets, they're starting to exhibit the same negative social phenomenon that the groups on the outside looking in America, blacks especially, but also Hispanics, have been experiencing for a long time. And as the statistics showed, white males now are in jail at a slightly higher percentage rate than Hispanic men in the United States, which has not happened in any recorded time in the country. Tommy Silverstein, he didn't seem motivated by much but his own internal rage. And this phenomenon is growing around the country. White prison gangs are growing. You had the indictment of you have all kind of indictments going on in different prison systems of white prison gangs that aren't necessarily or aren't really, per se racist or anything. They're just starting to be so many white guys doing long prison terms from hopeless backgrounds that the same behaviors and organizations are arising in them that has arisen in other groups before. But again, there's so many more white people. I just think this is an issue people better be cognizant of, because it's going to be too many of them to control at all. And I'll leave you with this clip from something that happened out of Colorado some years back. There was a suburban white guy, grew up, I don't know, he had problems, he ends up in prison, he's in and out of solitary confinement. It kind of exacerbates his mental issues. The 211 crew, that was the gang he was part of. When he gets out, he goes on a rampage, which includes that he basically knocked on the door of the Colorado Department of Corrections boss. And
pictures show what must have been the good days of Evan Ebel's life, but after the smiles and during his prison term came deep concerns.
I'm a parent of a son who's been incarcerated for 6 years.
During Jack Ebel's 2011 testimony at the state capitol, he spoke about how his son had deteriorated after being held in solitary confinement for 5.5 of the 6 years he had spent in prison.
He has a high level of paranoia, extremely anxious. So when he gets out to visit me, and he gets out of his cell to talk to me, he's so agitated that it will take an hour to an hour and a half before we can actually talk.
Ebel went on to say it was a far cry from the well-read son he had raised.
So what I'm telling you is that if he had, and he may have had some mental conditions going in, they are exacerbated to the point of that I hardly recognize my son sometimes.
So that was the story of terrible Tommy Silverstein of the AB. And hopefully he doesn't portend the future of American criminology or penology, because too many terrible Tommies would be pretty uncontrollable. Al Prophet, American Dope. 313, of course. December 1971. A solitary police car rolls across the empty Montana landscape. The passenger, a small-time stick-up man, just extradited back from Humboldt County, California for jumping parole. But he has a handcuff key, lets himself loose, snatches one of the Montana State Troopers' guns, forces him off the road, and locks him in their own truck. He then carjacks a passing motorist, tells him to drive to Idaho. Montana State Police finally catch up to them. He threatens to shoot the driver, but he doesn't, and the Montana State Troopers shoot the tire out, and he surrenders, and they take him to Montana State Prison to finish his term and, of course, face some new charges. May 27th, 1981, a police car is on the way from Folsom State Prison to the county jail in Vallejo. Once again, the prisoner likely has a handcuff key. And however he did it, he frees himself from his cuffs and extracts a .22 caliber pistol from his rectum. He takes the other cops' handcuffs, grabs both of their guns, handcuffs the cops together, and threatens them with the gun, but one of them has the wherewithal to slam the police car into a tree, and the two cops, still handcuffed together, jump out, run away, and of course the prisoner can't extricate himself because even though he has a gun, he's locked in the backseat of the police car, and he too ends up going back to prison, this time San Quentin. Now, what do these two guys have in common? These two would-be escapees, single guys hijacking the police all by themselves. They're both early members of the infamous Aryan Brotherhood. The guy in Montana was named Curtis Price, and the guy in Vallejo was the infamous Wendell Blue Norris. What do these incidents have in common? Well, both of these hardcore cons, capable of Houdini-like tricks and brazen defiance of law enforcement, are both early members of the Aryan Brotherhood, already infamous in the California prison system, but unknown amongst all but a few people in the free world. The Aryan Brotherhood was the subject of the largest criminal conspiracy case ever as of 2006 in American history. And the allegations went back further, and there was more investigative and financial resources from the federal government against these men who were already in prison than in any mafia or black street gang or Mexican trafficker. Aryan Brotherhood members, like the infamous Crip Lil Fee, whose intense prison discipline I cataloged in a story I did on him, had, to borrow a phrase from Nietzsche and Leni Riefenstahl's film about the 1936 Berlin Olympics, the will to power.
A third of the inmates are black. Many call themselves Panthers or Mau Mau. Blacks at San Quentin are angry also. One told us that for every black man who is murdered in the prison, 2 or 3 white convicts will be killed.
And they're going to have to understand that because all of us is dead, if it has to come to that.
Quote, throughout the history of the prison movement, there has been a marked tendency to discount the struggles of white prisoners, and that the real struggles are those of the brown and especially black prisoners. To discount the role that people of one race play in the struggle is by no means progressive, having, quote, liberal white guilt as its motivation. Now, this is a quote from an old prison newsletter published by the radical Sacramento Solidarity Committee in the early 70s, and I somewhat followed the thread of this idea all the way to its culmination of sorts with the end of hostilities agreement forged in Pelican Bay between the leaders of the various race-based security threat groups running the California prison system. Now, ironically, at one court proceeding, 3 AB heavy hitters, Blue Norris, John Stenson, and Robert Rowland, testified that the AB existed only as an outlook, a way of life. They also made the claim that prison authorities made up the Aryan Brotherhood as a way to justify restrictive confinement, but of course you need to be aware of what these guys are doing in prison. Here's one example. April 27th, 1984, AB member Robert Scully is in a bad mood and he attacks a guard with a knife. And then in May, a couple days later, he stabs another prison guard. So finally they gave him a full body search. They found 3 hacksaw blades in his rectum, 2 .22 bullets in his stomach. He had swallowed them. Somehow all the charges against him were dropped. And in May of the following year, 1985, he attacked another prisoner in San Quentin, and when they searched his cell this time, they found a gun. So finally, he got another 6 years.
Now, if you're a black man, it don't make any difference what clique you belong to. As long as you're black, you're going to get hit. If you're a white man, it don't make any difference what your age or what clique, you're going to get hit.
It used to be a certain group against another group, the Nazis against the Muslims. But now it's a black face against a white face, and everyone is a target.
Once upon a time, this eyesore, called Curtis Price when he was alive, the guy from Montana, caused a major rift within the infamous Aryan Brotherhood, or what he did at the behest of the AB Commission did. He's the guy that murked the innocent people at the behest of the California AB, causing 2 members of the brand's ruling commission to drop out and debrief. One of the men who ruled in favor of Price taking out innocent people was none other than the man from our second hijacking story, Wendell Blue Norris. So when you hear tales of the ruling council of the Aryan Brotherhood, they aren't just prison yard tough guys or even merely killers. They see themselves as outlaws, and those 2 hijacking stories at the beginning alone show you what kind of deep contempt for the very concept of the criminal justice system they had. Now, before we take this deep dive into the early days of the Aryan Brotherhood and events around the late 70s and mid 80s that forged them into the most, at least infamous, prison organization in the public's mind, let's take a quick detour into the sinister world of jailhouse snitching, as Curtis Price's homicide of a jailhouse snitch's family members is one of the key threads in our story's dark tapestry.
It is a nationwide problem, but one of the most glaring examples exists here at San Quentin, a few miles from downtown San Francisco. More than 3,500 inmates, many of them considered among the most dangerous in the nation, crammed into century-old facilities designed to accommodate...
It's the month of May 1978. Curtis Price arrived in San Quentin, and he tells a fellow inmate he's going to kill Leroy Banks, an African-American inmate, because Banks had been disrespectful to an AB in the past. He then stabbed Banks 10 to 15 times in the chest, and Banks died of his wounds. Prison authorities found Price with 2 shanks in October of '78 and again in May of 1980. And while he was in jail awaiting trial in the murder case, Price, who doesn't look like, that particularly physically intimidating, he struck jail guards on 2 occasions. On another occasion, he bit some while they were taking him to court. And it goes to show that size and strength aren't necessarily what make people violent and dangerous. It's something inside of you, and the AB guys definitely have it. So now the story of the snitch at the center of this first part. Stephen Barnes was his name. Throwing away other people's lives was the name of his game. Now, Steve Barnes was supposedly an AB, and he had testified against other members from the late 70s on. Because he wanted to do the right thing, not to get out of jail early. So he's the centerpiece of this formerly obscure but now getting some light as the internet plumbs the death of criminal history set of murders committed for the Aryan Brotherhood, which caused this rift, caused Michael Thompson to leave and start snitching, also Clifford Smith. And oddly enough, he was also a witness in a really high-profile case that was the longest criminal case in American history at the time. That happened in '85. I know I've said biggest and longest twice, but both times is the Hillside Strangler case. So this Barnes guy testified against the 2 cousins here in LA who were convicted of grabbing and red rumming young women all around LA.
From the self-defense classes in the suburbs to the prostitutes trying to protect themselves on the street, the Strangler case makes one fact vividly clear. People can never totally protect themselves from unknown killers who choose their victims at random, leaving behind virtually no clues and even less understanding of their motives. I'm Geraldo Rivera, ABC News, Hollywood.
So he's already in prison. He's testifying against AB members, and I guess he's in the LA County Jail when these guys are brought in, and he conveniently overhears them confessing, and he goes in and testifies against them. And I'm sure they would have been convicted even without his testimony, but there's a lot of informants have very sordid pasts themselves, but of course, like a prosecutor will say, like who's in the drug house or in the dark alley at night when the murder or the crime occurs. It's the kind of people that are in drug houses or dark alleys, but nonetheless. So at the time he testified against the Hillside Stranglers, I think his family had already been murdered, or I think it was his father-in-law, stepfather, had already been murdered because of his testimony, and he was still doing it. So takes a special kind of person. Okay, so now oh my God, people are so crazy addendum to this little side story. Kenneth Bianchi, who was one of the cousins that was convicted of being a Hillside Strangler and the one that Stephen Barnes testified against, once he went to prison for life, he convinced a woman from his prison cell, writing letters, to go and strangle a random woman. He gave her some of his man material in a plastic glove in the prison waiting room so she could plant it on the woman she strangled, so it would seem like the real Hillside Strangler was on the loose, and this broad went and did it. Luckily, the woman lived, but she strangled a woman and tried to plant his DNA on her. So, I mean, these are the kind of people that are snitches in big cases, crazy people that it seems hard to believe. So, at the center of the 1982 sort of changing of what the AB was the murder of this Stephen Barnes, who was an informant against AB members, his family. But what kind of guy was he? Not justifying any of this other stuff, but he definitely was a crazy person. Michael Thompson and Clifford guy that was on the council defected and said, we don't want to kill innocent people. And, you know, of course, I mean, they had other reasons for snitching. They probably thought they were going to get out early, but Michael Thompson recently got out and caught a case for EDD fraud. I don't think Clifford Smith, he probably died in prison, but so this weirdo Stephen Barnes, who testified in this Hillside Strangler case, was kind of one of the reasons the AB changed and started to unravel. And even the formation of them having a council at all was different from their initial credo of just a band of outlaws who were really only would only unite for reasons of revenge. Now they began to have a hierarchy, and they began to get more into organized crime, at least in the distribution of drugs and running extortion in the prison system. Okay, so how did Curtis Price get into this? So the Aryan Brotherhood, the Mexican Mafia, a lot of these groups still have little court cases that allow them to subpoena other members so they can all be in the same place. And so by 1983, Price had finished his California prison term out of Humboldt County. Montana extradited him back for the escape attempt, and he had finished up that time. And so his AB brothers in California knew he'd be getting out in Montana soon, so some cases going on, and they subpoena him. He comes to Palm Hall, which I guess was a really run-down part of Chino, where the CDC first tried to segregate the prison gang leaders, which of course probably just made things worse. And this is before the construction of like Pelican Bay and the creation of the SHU program, like they have a SHU at Corcoran and Folsom. So Price comes down to Palm Hall on a subpoena, and so Price comes down from Palm Hall on a subpoena, and that's where Blinky Griffin, Robert Blinky. So Curtis Price comes down to Palm Hall on a subpoena in '83, and that's where Robert Blinky Griffin, John Youngster Stinson, and other members hatched a plan to organize the gang into a hierarchical enterprise with a strict code of conduct. In 1982, the AB sought to modernize its structure, streamline its ability to conduct criminal enterprise. Originally, the ABs had no hierarchy. Everybody was equal. And at this point, they abandoned the group's original kind of free-for-all democratic structure, and they established a 9-man council with a 3-man presiding commission. And the 3-man commission, which initially was Bobby New York Crane, Robert Blinky Griffin, and Wendell Blue Norris, had the final say on things. And like I said, this marked a near total inversion of the brand's founding philosophy, which was individual outlaws bound together in effect really by one thing: the obligation to revenge by death any slight on another brother. Now, it's totally different than, say, like the Nuestra Familia or Black Guerrilla Family, which at least had a political idea behind it, whether you believe, you know, it was real or whatever, or it got diluted. They did have that as part, at least, of their official structure. Mexican Mafia and AB really were criminal outlaw things from the start. Maybe that's why they had an alliance. And the brand is best epitomized by the series of stories it took its name from. Riding for the Brand, a collection of short stories by Louis L'Amour. And the blurb of the book reads, or the collection reads, you might win a plot of land in a card game only to find you had to win it again with a gun. From a has-been boxer to a ranch hand taking on his boss's troubles, the characters in these classic Louis L'Amour short stories are all riding for the brand, staying loyal, staking the West with their courage and their blood. So prior to 82, AB members were allowed to freelance contract killings and extort from anyone they wanted other than other ABs. Some guys really did just join to kill African American inmates. But now any hit had to be sanctioned by the council, and some Aryan Brotherhood members forsook the hate of black people for the love of dead honkies, aka money. Michael Thompson claims his reason for debriefing was not wanting to let Curtis Price kill the innocents, and so did Clifford Smith. But now Smith, when he turned into a snitch, and he was talking about the murders he committed for the AB or while in AB, he complained about the fact that once the commission was implemented, he had to beg Robert Blinky Griffin to let him kill a heroin addict named Stephen Clark. Quote, he called me a punk in front of my daughter, Smith testified. I'd been trying to get Blinky to let me kill him for months. When he got the approval, Smith said he stabbed Clark 37 times. So maybe he was just mad he couldn't kill in any way like he used to. This is a guy that at one time said he killed 9 people as an AB on the witness stand. Another time he said he killed 20. And Robert Blinky Griffin, incidentally, if you wonder how he got his name, supposedly if he blinked in a certain way at certain people, they were marked. Now, the convict code, if you think that really exists, says the killing of innocent people, wives, children, and parents is wrong. But in 1983, with AB council members Big Mike Thompson and Clifford Smith objecting, both future dropouts, Curtis Price was dispatched to murder Steve Barnes' father, Richard, as well as a female AB associate who assisted him, and then she had to go for her because she knew too much. So you help the AB, and they just get rid of you too, kind of like the mafia. Now, on February 13th of 83, sheriff's deputies discovered the body of Richard Barnes in the bedroom of his residence. He'd been shot point blank 3 times by a .22 caliber handgun. And he sent a note to the AB fellas, quote, that's took care of. Everything went well. I am going back Northern California. I will be in touch with you later. There's all sorts of evidence. He had gotten gas in Pomona. He left a note in his mother's house with the nickname for the guy he killed. So, you know, for all his killing and his AB stature, he still had to stay with his mom when he went down to Southern California to do this hit. So, as I mentioned, this success in his mission had a big cost for the AB. And when Thompson and Clifford Smith dropped out and debriefed, now mind you, this is 80, well, I don't know, Thompson dropped out right then, and I think Clifford Smith not long after. Debriefed, now you start to have this treasure trove of all this info starting from maybe 67 with the murder of Robert Holderman and the real coalescence of the AB, all the way up to this point, 83. And the intelligence that those two guys gave then laid the groundwork for the prison gang unit and to help the ATF in 2002 do the RICO indictments I referenced as the largest criminal case, which incidentally included the death penalty as an option for quite a few of the ABs. It had a bunch of death penalty options. And one of the chief witnesses in the massive RICO trial and the other AB dropout you always see on the cable news show is, he's almost 70 years old, John Greshner. He's serving a double life sentence for murder and conspiracy to commit murder resulting from the 1984 killing of a fellow inmate at Leavenworth. Greshner said the man was killed because he refused to pay a large gambling debt owed to AB. Quote, "We made sure to get the word out. If you burn the AB, you go in the hat," meaning there's a contract on your life. And Greshner didn't seem to have a problem with what Curtis Price did. Neither did almost anybody in the AB. And today, John Greshner lives in... Ironically, John Greshner, the dropout, I mean, he has, when this guy interviewing him went to see him, he said, "Hey, before I joined the AB, I did stick-ups with black guys and Native Americans, no problem. And now that he's in PC and lives under an assumed name, his cellmate is black, and they get along fine, even though Greshner has a swastika tattoo, which she insists is the Sanskrit version, not the Nazi kind. Quote, "To me, it's a Buddhist thing," he said. "I'm a yogi." Even having now think about that, even having went so far as to debrief and get on the witness stand against these guys, he still can't give up the imagery of the brand. Kinda weird. So back to 1982, 1983 and the council coming in. And it's all about money, not necessarily race war, and even more contrary to the Brotherhood's initial sort of every man for himself thing. Even within that commission, immediately there was a festering rivalry between Blinky Griffin and Blue Norris. And one AB dropout, Casper Crowell, you've seen him on Nat Geo, he said the new Aryan Brotherhood really was the heroin brotherhood, and that they, quote, went into Crip mode after the formation of the council in '83. The leadership put an end to the war with the Black Guerrilla family, and they were selling Tookie Williams and Ray Ray Browning's Bloods and Crips dope and murdering white men aligned to either Blinky or Blue. So they were selling dope to the blacks, and they were killing each other over who was going to be in power. In the gloom of his federal prison cell at Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, a man opens a letter. Finding the pages blank, he holds a match underneath the letter, and secret writing appears. "War with DC Blacks," it read, signed T.D. Bingham. T.D. Bingham was one of the leaders of the Aryan Brotherhood. He was housed at the Florence Supermax prison in Colorado, and he had just used invisible ink to order Alan Big Al Benton, the Aryan Brotherhood leader at Lewisburg Prison, to plot and carry out a plan to kill as many black inmates from Washington, D.C. as he and the other ABs at Lewisburg could. The year was 1997. What went on next is a pretty shocking sequence of events, not least of which was the fact that one of the men they ended up killing was a white guy from Illinois who was in prison for bombing a roller skating rink because too many blacks skated there. He was also a self-styled KKK member who then became Muslim in prison and sought the company and presumably protection of the black inmates from Washington, D.C. at Lewisburg. But first, a little background. Back in the 1970s, before the explosion of federal inmates and prison gangs, the guys from Washington, D.C. were probably the biggest group of people in federal prison, and the Aryan Brotherhood was the most violent. They were on a collision course, and by the late 70s and early 80s, they were killing each other in prisons across the country. By 1997, it had become more of a Cold War, mostly because so many of the Aryan Brotherhood leaders, the ones who had been around for the start of the war, were deep in isolation cells. Perhaps also because the DC guys, who were and are so deep because DC isn't in any state, so almost all of their inmates go into the federal system, and thus their ranks turn over constantly. Perhaps most of them at Lewisburg didn't even realize what was going on in the heads of the old Aryan Brotherhood sending orders. So, back to Big Al Benton. He now has this order and he has to act. The reason for the war? It actually began in USP Lewisburg in Pennsylvania, where Big Al was the most powerful among the white inmates. Among them were a group of white nationalists, aka white supremacists, formed around a guy named Richard Scutari, the former chief of security for a group of crazies known as the Order. The Order were actual white supremacists. They had killed a well-known Jewish radio personality, and they robbed a bunch of banks and I think an armored car. They got millions and millions of dollars, and they were going to use that to finance the creation of an all-white ethnic state in the Pacific Northwest. So Scutari got hit and was doing a long prison term, and inside Lewisburg prison there was a white guy named Randall Scott Anderson. He had newly arrived from another prison. He was only about 2 years deep into a 9-year sentence. He was considered a race traitor by the white supremacists, though he sounds more like someone with just psychological problems to me. Anderson had been a self-styled KKK member in 1992 when he made a pipe bomb and tried to blow up a roller skating rink because too many black people were there. But then, once he got caught and was sent to prison, he changed his tune and became a Muslim. In prison, almost all of the Muslim car, to use the parlance of the day, is black. So in Lewisburg prison, Randall Scott Anderson was with the black Muslims. Big Al and the Aryan Brotherhood didn't seem to particularly care, but the white supremacists did. On November 8, 1996, Anderson was stabbed to death while in the cell of a black inmate. 3 days later, in retaliation, black inmates killed a white inmate named Perry York, who was not a member of the white supremacist group, but was white. A guy named Merrick Kowalski, formerly known as the skinhead Mark Frank Kowalski, was serving time there as well for bombing an NAACP chapter, and Kowalski wrote a letter to a white supremacist publication where he complained about the fact that he had been charged and framed for the Anderson killing. But of course, when he was charged with the murder some years later, eventually he immediately rolled over and testified against his accomplice in the killing, Peter Georgia Caracos, the co-founder of the White Order of Thule Society, one of the various exotic lunacies of the white supremacist movement. I guess no one ever told the white supremacists in prison that it's actually impossible to be supreme while being an inmate. Whoops. The killing of Perry York by blacks could have escalated the conflict between the white nationalists and the Muslims to an all-out race war in USP Lewisburg. In modern prison politics, you do not lay a hand on the member of another race. However, under the leadership of Big Al Benton, the Aryan Brotherhood in Lewisburg tried to calm the situation down. They didn't want war, maybe because they were so heavily outnumbered. Now, on to USP Marion in Illinois, which had always been a hotbed of DC black and AB beef. Marion was where John Gotti had been beaten up by a black bank robber from DC, leading him to put a hit out with the Brotherhood on the guy, Walter O. Johnson, who beat him up. So right after Randall Scott Anderson was killed in Lewisburg, a member of the DC blacks assaulted, without provocation, supposedly, allegedly, a dirty white boy named Joseph Tokash. Now, the Dirty White Boys is the name of a gang, and they're perhaps the AAA team for the Aryan Brotherhood, you could call them. They did their bidding while jockeying for membership in the AB. The assault on Tokash should, on paper, have caused the Dirty White Boys to immediately retaliate against the DC blacks. But the guy who stabbed Tokash had been on the outs with his own gang, and it came out that he attacked Tokash in order to be placed in isolation, which is a well-known tactic among those who want to PC up while making it appear otherwise. A few weeks later, the Dirty White Boys were attacked in the yard by a dozen DC blacks. Why it spun out of control, I don't know. And after that, the shot callers for the Aryan Brotherhoods and USP Marion ordered any black that had attacked a white to be killed. So in Marion, there was a war between the ABs and the DC blacks, and it really kind of could have extended to everyone. And when Barry Mills and T.D. Bingham and USP Florence in Colorado, two of the Federal Brotherhood shot callers, who along with Al Benton at Lewisburg made up the ruling three-man commission, learned that D.C. blacks had put a hit on the AB's two shot callers in USP Marion. They declared total war on the black gang. And so that's how on August 28th, 1997, Big Al in Lewisburg received a secret message from T.D. Bingham. Quote, war with D.C. blacks. Within 16 hours of getting the letter, Big Al had organized two assault crews, one led by himself, the other led by a hardcore AB named Wayne Bridgewater. Now, Wayne Bridgewater had already killed a black inmate back in 1981, stabbing him 25 times. But he was only about 5 years from paroling at that point, and he'd been incident-free for 9 years. And Bridgewater refused Big Al's orders to kill certain D.C. black members because he knew them too well and didn't want to do it. But in the end, Bridgewater did attack other D.C. guys by himself, and he stabbed 4 of them by himself, killing 2 of the D.C. crew single-handedly. The guys from D.C. were named Frank Joyner and Abdul Salam. It was the largest single attack in the history of the Aryan Brotherhood's war with the D.C. blacks, which continued at a hot pace for a while after that. I don't know what's going on with it now. As an aside, I was reading the Justice for David Yarborough site. He was part of the order with Richard Scutari, and he claims the AB-DC blacks war was over drugs, which sounds about right, and that the white supremacists considered the AB just another prison gang, not the leaders of the whites. So anyways, the AB under Big Al Benton at Lewisburg with Wayne Bridgewater in the lead did the deed and then murdered 2 black inmates from Washington, D.C. in a preemptive attack. But something very weird happened. Just 14 hours after the murders in USP Lewisburg, Alan Benton, one of the big 3 bosses of the federal Aryan Brotherhood, turned on his gang of over 20 years and checked into protective custody. Maybe he thought he was going to be killed by the D.C. blacks or some other black people. I don't know. Just like that, a switch in him flipped. Benton had made his bones with the AB back in the 70s when the man who testified against him in a drug conspiracy case showed up at the Atlanta penitentiary. 15 hours later, he was dead, stabbed to death by Alan Benton. Probably killed other people in prison, and he certainly ordered murders as he rose to be a part of the Aryan Brotherhood's commission in the federal system, along with T.D. Bingham and Barry the Red Baron Mills. Fast forward to 2005. Over 40 AB members were indicted, and 21 of them were death penalty eligible. It made the Aryan Brotherhood indictment case the largest death penalty case, though none of them got it, in American history. Think about that for a second. The largest death penalty case in American history was against the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang. Now, think about this. Big Al Benton, who was personally involved in many of the murders and attempted murders in the AB indictment and whose direct orders to Wayne Bridgewater resulted in the 2 murders at Lewisburg, one of the worst incidents in modern prison gang history, was the prosecution's most important witness. Tyler Bingham and Barry Mills, the top targets of the indictment, had, to me, very plausibly, they had the defense that when they sent a letter that said war with D.C. blacks, it was a warning to be on guard, not an order to attack anybody. Did Al Benton make a mistake when he ordered Wayne Bridgewater and others to do what they did? Was the AB going to hit him for what he did? Because that's when you make a bad call, you get hit. And Wayne Bridgewater did Benton's bidding, and he's going to end his days in prison for that, while Al Benton may be out in the free world right now, or at least he's somewhere secret prison and maybe relatively comfortable. T.D. Bingham and Barry Mills and many other ABs had more life sentences stacked on them. T.D. Bingham actually was going to get out fairly soon with their one-time leader Alan Benton's help. So in the end, the white boys did each other very dirty. American dope. The Aryan Brotherhood RICO trial hit a bit of a wrinkle 3 weeks in. Ronnie Yandel and Danny Troxel, supposedly the number 1 and 2 guys.
Ronald Yandel is the alleged ringleader of a crime spree involving the Aryan Brotherhood. Prosecutors used federal wiretaps to discover that Yandel enlisted these fellow Aryan Brotherhood gang members to commit a series of crimes from behind prison walls.
And through that wiretap, we built a very strong case.
Guards testified that on the van ride from the federal courthouse to New Folsom Prison, Ronald Yandel and Danny Troxel blew up at each other with a series of back and forth threats that an officer ranked as a 10 out of 10 on the danger scale.
Because I was just trying to get, the guy just kept coming at me.
Todd Asker, according to the Department of Corrections, is a member of the Aryan Brotherhood. He was sent to the Pelican Bay SHU because he assaulted a guard and killed another inmate.
But it was in self-defense. The guy wanted me to give him some money and all this. He felt I owed him, right? And I didn't feel I owed him nothing.
A few of their hardcore leaders sat in the back and plotted their return, and no one's more hardcore and diabolical than the old school Aryan Brotherhood. Led by Todd Asker, who had spent 27 years in solitary confinement, a series of hunger strikes and lawsuits finally freed them and the leaders of the BGF, Nuestra Familia, La MA, and others from their draconian dungeons and back into the general inmate population in 2015, where they immediately moved to solidify their grip on the prison's dope trade and control of the white inmate population by any means necessary, to borrow a term from somewhere else.
We are the ones who formed what was known as the Pelican Bay SHU Short Corridor Collective, which was a prisoner class human rights movement seeking to expose the torture of long-term decades. You know, it was well known that I was one of the main catalysts for the creation of that group, and all the writings that were put out in public describing our complaints, and in order to educate the public and other prisoners about what's really been going on in this California system in these SHU units for close to 30 years.
Todd Asker, who also sued the California Department of Corrections successfully, and the construction company who built Pelican Bay for failure to protect him because some members of the NF popped their cell and were able to hit him up. He got several $100,000, and he also got the freedom to hit a regular level 4 prison yard. And I mean, more than Todd Asker certainly is responsible for ending the lockdown, but he's probably the single most important person, and he's back in solitary, and the administration likes him there.
So that was an opportunity for IGI and probably the administration to separate me from the other main representatives in this coalition.
And to show you that the phrase "with friends like these, who needs enemies" means, there's a guy named Steve-O, not sure if it was a guy who was Asker's AB buddy. Asker gave him some money from his settlement, and so this guy wanted to get out of Pelican Bay and be able to spend some of this money he got from Asker, so he murked his cellie and then dropped out and debriefed, so he got put into somewhere more comfortable, I think Mule Creek, where he could get Fat Canteen, do DOPE, and chase them boys. Meanwhile, his benefactor, Todd Asker, is back locked down and supposedly in the hat.
I've been in the SHU already for 28.3 years.
Ordering smuggling drugs into California prisons. That's what the feds say the members of the Aryan Brotherhood are doing. They charged 16 members with running an extensive criminal enterprise today. 7 people outside prison were charged with assisting.
Drama never stops. It's still going on even in court. You're an effing piece of shit. You're an effing piece of shit. You're an effing piece of shit. This was what Ronnie Yandel, a.k.a. Renegade, a.k.a. the #1 AB in the state of California, was yelling at his co-defendant, Danny Troxel's attorney, in court. And Danny Troxel's attorney said, "At least I'm not a rat." You're a rat. The cop testified that Troxel and Yandel were yelling at each other. So I don't know if there's any coming back from that.
It's a new and increasing face, white and middle class.
The black, the poor, still outnumber him by a vast majority. But they all share one experience, prison.
After the race and heroin wars of the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s that saw hundreds unalived and resulted in the California prison GANGSs expanding their reach onto the streets and into the federal system across the country, prison administration managed to somewhat contain them by infamously slamming them down into special confinement units away from the rest of the inmates.
Pelican Bay is to isolate those individuals who come into the prison system and cannot behave within the prison system.
Built at a cost of $250 million, Pelican Bay was designed as a massive automated isolation unit using state-of-the-art technology. Inside the shoe, no bars, but specially designed steel doors, no direct sunlight ever, and no direct contact with another inmate. For 22.5 hours a day, inmates are kept in their cells, and for 24 hours a day, the inmates are under the control of heavily armed guards.
California led the country in this long-term lockdown policy, and by August of 2011, 128 guys had been in total isolation for over 20 years, and 723 had been in for a decade.
The man in his holding cell outside of his pod is Todd Ashker. Ashker is in prison for murder.
I didn't even consciously know I was.
According to the SAC-B, this morning, Patrick Big Pat Brady, as they called him, pleaded guilty to murder in aid of racketeering.
Leading up to the indictment in 2019 and even after it, there has been, to quote the lead prosecutor, a circular firing squad among the top dogs of the California AB. Quick aside, the California and federal chapters of the AB are the only ones that recognize each other. Now, all kind of states, Arizona, Ohio, New Mexico, you'll hear they got Aryan Brotherhoods, and I'm sure they have different types of relations with each other. But as far as recognizing someone as a made member brother, it's only California and the feds. And interestingly, the lead defendant, renegade Ronnie Yandel, the California #1, he got inducted into the brand while serving a 10-year federal sentence after getting caught with Method Man production materials in the great state of New Jersey.
They came to me one day in my cell, and before I went up to Pelican Bay, said, we've ran an investigation on you, determined you're a member of the Aryan Brotherhood, and they validated me with an indeterminate shoe program, which means that I had to stay the rest of my life in the shoe until I died, because I had 65 years of life. And I was like, well, how did you determine that I was a validated gay member? And they said through these confidential information that they didn't have a right to reveal who it actually was, so I could defend myself or dispute whatever they were saying about me. So this went on some informant or somebody that debriefed some other prisoner, most likely owed money or for heroin debts or drug debts, or did some kind of dirty thing in prison, and they go check in to be protected, and they tell them whatever they tell the police whatever they want them to.
That's what I call these debriefers. They're torture victims who were so desperate and broke down. They were broke down by the conditions that were subjected to such an extent that everything that was ever contrary to all of their beliefs and the way they lived their whole life up to that point, it just destroyed that. And they went crawling on their stomachs to these gang unit investigators and wanted to lick on their boots and say, please get me out of here, I can't take it anymore.
Traxel's defense attorney has been trying to paint him as a peacemaker that kept telling Yandel and others, no, don't kill this guy, don't do that, let it go. Kind of a weird defense, and as a matter of fact, Todd Laris, Traxel's lawyer, the one who called Yandel a rat, has asked several witnesses on the stand whether Yandel and his cellmate Billy Sylvester broke Aryan Brotherhood codes of conduct. So I don't know if that's a defense to get him out of jail, or these two guys are just juggling with each other in some personal battle. And there's hundreds of made members of the Aryan Brotherhood, I guess, or at least 100 or something. Lots of these guys were not mixed up in this. I don't know if this is really about a couple drug rings and the people at the top trying to impose their will. It's not about the whole AB, and in fact, all these criminal cases that you usually read about, especially in prisons, you know, everybody's not involved. It's just a small group of people. Yandel put out during pandemic, Yandel had a cell phone and was posting a bunch of videos to Instagram and on YouTube.
It's dumb to see us all as divided. Who's dividing us is the powers that be, the hidden hand. Some people call them the blue bloods and the secret society, but it truly is big pharma, agriculture, banking, and media. The same 1% of the families of the world control that, and they're the ones that are actually manipulating people.
What he was saying is true. It seemed like he was kind of he was going by the true philosophy of what they all talked about during the end of hostilities. He got very politicized, but of course he was talking in public and making vague references to some of the stuff in prison. I would imagine that could definitely be considered by some as falling outside of the realm of what he was supposed to do, and maybe that's what Troxel's lawyer was referring to. Several of them have gotten on the witness stand, though certainly not all. Lots of them have just taken plea agreements, but a few key ones, including two high-up ABs, have turned state's evidence. One was Travis Burhop, who from his own prison cell ran a large H and Method Man operation that was making deliveries as far away as Missouri, and who allegedly had pounds and pounds and pounds of H and Chris coming into the prison facility he was in, generating probably hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars over the years in profits spread out amongst everybody. And then there was Donald Popeye Mazza, who started as a member of the Huntington Beach surf Nazi crew, public enemy #1.
Remembers the beginning.
When we were kids, I mean, we started this as kids. We were all punk rockers at Disneyland.
He is Brody Davis, a parolee who has done time for intimidating a witness. A far cry from Disneyland, he and his Kenai brothers put down roots in the white supremacist skinhead movement, fertilized by hate, still blossoming into racist anger.
And he eventually became an AB, which brought the public enemy #1 into a tight alliance with the AB as their foot soldiers while the ABs were still locked down. The public enemy #1, Kenai as it's called, was in charge of enforcing their will out in the general population.
By the early 90s, Kenai had moved to Orange County, which became its main stomping grounds. Anaheim became a familiar haunt.
They were deputized, if you will. Now, for a long time, the infamous Nazi lowriders had served this sort of deputy service to the AB, but a bunch of them ended up getting also locked down.
With AB lockdown, that gave rise to the Nazi lowriders, or NLR, another white supremacist gang that started running the prison yards in the 1990s.
They're straight killers. The lowriders are killers. They're like a rattlesnake. You walk across their shaded area and they're just liable to strike you without much of a warning at all.
And without much warning at all. In January of 1999, the NLR was snake bit itself. The Department of Corrections named NLR a prison gang, and its members, like the Aryan Brotherhood, are now locked down in special security cells. And that has opened a prison door for Kenai.
We are getting intelligence that they are stepping up to take the place of the Nazi lowriders from the main line.
And the secure housing units, they were part of the groups that had to be let out back in 2015, and the ones that were left on the main line kind of got watered down, so Kenai had to step into the fold. So it was very important when Donald Popeye Mazza got made an AB, and it also was very important just a few weeks ago when he got on that witness stand.
And when this heavy metal door at Wasco State Prison cranked open in April of 1999, inmate Mazza, known as Popeye, was released on parole. Detectives say within 5 hours of his release, Popeye was back in Orange County. seated inside a camper smoking methamphetamine with 2 accomplices and the hit victim, a gang dropout named Billy Ray Austin. According to this felony complaint, Dominic Rizzo, another Peni parolee, beat and held Austin as Popeye plunged a knife into him over and over again. Then, Popeye turned to witnesses and said, "Want some too, punk?"
He said he knew as soon as he saw his name in the indictment that he was going to end up on the witness stand, and the 53-year-old made it official earlier this month, seated next to a federal judge and dressed in a moss green jail jumpsuit. He was on the stand 3 full days recounting his life of crime. He did a lot. His entrance into the AB, his incarceration, and the consequences of his decision to drop out and cooperate with the feds. Quote, "I will be hunted the rest of my life by your client," Maza told an attorney representing one of the AB lawyers during cross-examination.
This particular group has a very great potential for violence and are pretty much unpredictable when that violence may occur.
Correctional Officer Wes Harris says, it started decades ago with members of the Aryan Brotherhood, or AB, the gang of gangs among white supremacists.
So Peni got its start as kind of just young kids being white supremacists down in Huntington Beach. They got famous in the early 2000s because one of their founders, a guy named Scottish, made the mistake of giving an interview to a local news agency, and actually I talked to his romantic partner from a long time ago, and she told me a lot more, and maybe I'll go further into that story. But long story short, Scottish did a little brief TV interview. They blurred his face, but they could tell who he was, I think from like his pit bull or something in the background, and they came and murked him.
This dog's owner belongs to a group so taken with violence.
His name's Hitman Tank.
He jokes even his pit bull carries a sawed-off shotgun. But later, seeing the dog in action, it's arguable Tank doesn't need a weapon. And as night falls in this remote area near Big Bear,
Myself, I have over 300 guns.
the tattooed hands of Tank's owner ready a .38 revolver.
Meanwhile, Maza went to prison in the early 2000s for attempted murder. He hit a SEX offender and ended up in Pelican Bay, where he met the fellas, and he ended up getting made. And when he joined AB in 07, it was seen by law enforcement as a power play for Peni, turning its members essentially into foot soldiers for the still slammed down AB.
Led by convicted killer John Stinson, the AB are locked away in special units at maximum security prisons like this one at Pelican Bay. This white supremacist ex-convict explains it simply.
I don't know if too many ABs walk in the yard, because ABs are all locked down and they don't have any physical contact with anybody.
Maza got out in the early 2010s. He did so with a new outlook on life. He claims because people in the AB told him, man, don't come back here to prison. Well, that would have been one wise thing, they said. He got baptized, as you see in this photo. He got his racist tattoos removed from his chest. And by his own admission, he was 90% legal, but still 10% illegal. So he found himself back part of this indictment. And of course, sitting at the Christian table doesn't save you from the punishments of your past. Only turning state's evidence can do that, and that's what Maza did. He admitted to conspiring with members of the AB and Peni to murder a man named Michael Thumper Tripp, a fellow gang member whose homicide prosecutors contend was ordered by, I think, Yandel. Thumper did not end up getting whacked, and he wrote a letter to the court trying to help Maza. And federal prosecutors and Maza both contend as part of his plea deal that he only pretended that he was going to try to hit Thumper. He was scared to tell his AB bosses no. Of course, this is how the Prosecutors justify giving him a plea deal. Is it true that he was never going to do it, or he just was incapable or didn't get around to it? Who knows? Prosecutors have agreed, of course, to seek a low-end sentence for Mr. Mazza, though it does carry life in prison. But he was very, very important, as evinced by his 3 days of testimony. I'm sure he'll be walking around a meth house near you before the year 2030, if I had to guess. Mazza's current whereabouts are unknown. His whereabouts went dark in September 2021 when his info disappeared from the Sacramento County Jail Register, along with the whereabouts of Travis Burhap, the guy who was the point man in a giant AB method man and horse conspiracy. He pled guilty for plotting with Renegade Randall and Danny Troxel to a specific homicide, murking one of their AB brothers, a guy named James Mickey. And once again, he was given the same excuse as Donald Mazza. Burhap said he was never intending to actually do it. He just told him yes, so they'd leave him alone. Burhap may never have actually earned his rack. Burhap got let in because he was a real serious drug dealer, and he generated a lot of money. So Burhap had been ordered to personally hit this AB Mickey, and in order to gain entrance into the AB and avoid the repercussions of not doing it, he agreed to arrange a hit on him at Calipatria State Prison in August of 2016, though his hurt wasn't in it, according to the deal he signed with prosecutors. Interesting. I mean, some of the people you think would never get out and are the worst ones are walking around, and different people get roped into different things. Crime in general, the court system in prison is very chaotic. You never know where you might end up, so best not to get involved. With Travis Burhap leading the dope dealing side, the AB's generated so much cash dealing inside and outside California prisons that U.S. Attorney McGregor Scott said when the indictments were announced that they'd seized a house and other property which were purchased with drug proceeds used by the AB. And the average house in California is $500,000. So between buying houses and cars and putting money on people's books and getting high and all the different, paying for people's wives and girlfriends and kids on the outs, they probably were generating, several $1 million over the course of the conspiracy. Now, interestingly, we know about the long-time ties between the AB and the Mexican Mafia. Well, Travis Burhap admitted to conspiring specifically with a Mexican Mafia member named Michael Mosca Torres, and Torres would supply him with H, and I think Burhap handled the meth, and they were sending stuff to Washington State, Missouri, and within the California prison system. As I said earlier, there was one person who murked himself and one person who was unalived in the indictment. Well, Mosca Torres was the one who was unalived.
California State Prison is investigating the stabbing death of an inmate. According to investigators, two inmates, Juan Martinez and Ray Martinez, attacked and killed 59-year-old Michael Torres. Torres had been serving a 133-year sentence for a list of crimes, including attempted murder, and was a third strike offender.
And he was the only non-AB or AB affiliate. Mosca, his nickname means the fly. He'd been in prison since I think the early 90s. He was in charge of all of LA County Jail, collecting dues from Southsiders there, which is a big money maker. He was from a very old gang, the San Fer gang in San Fernando Valley, but he got murked in July of 2023 in some type of, I guess, internal power play. He got hit in a California state prison, and just a few weeks ago, 13 people that had been working for him as part of the Mexican Mafia or Serrano power structure to collect the money and control the LA County Jail, they just got hit with the RICO, even though the leader of it was killed almost a year ago. There's a lot of wiretap info on Yandel, especially coming out of his prison cell phone, about Mosca Torres sending up very, very high quality H through his runners to Northern California to service Yandel's people on the outs and also the stuff that came into the prison. The only person going into this that was a little bit famous was a former MMA guy named Matt Psycho Hall. Psycho Hall was psycho. He was running around Orange County taxing drug dealers on behalf of the AB, and there was I think he ended up killing a guy who taxed the wrong person, something at a hotel. But basically he killed somebody over $2,500. Went on the run, got caught in Costa Rica, and then swung himself in a Costa Rican jail cell before he could be brought up to indictment. And then other than that, there's like 2 women and a lawyer. So that's all 16 of them. 3 still on trial, 2 dead. Everyone else pled out, and 2 of them are big, important state's informants. Donald Mazza from Peni, formerly of Peni, and Travis Burhop. And I'll just leave you with this. This is a whole big separate part of it, but besides the dope, when the Brotherhood was away, the skinheads did play, but when the brand wrote again, the skinheads did pay. Other than Yogi Pinnell, most of the homicides, or all of the homicides alleged in the case, revolve around the fact that 4 skinhead gangs, and ABs are not skinheads, but Peni is, United States Aryan Skins, or United States Association of Skins or something, the Golden State Skins, the Wolfpack out of Sacramento, and the American Front tried to come together in the California prisons to overthrow the AB's power, and Peni was going at all of them. And Ronald Renegade Yandel's cellmate Billy Sylvester, he's charged, and I think the opening crime in the indictment, the 2011 homicide of a guy on the yard at Folsom that Sylvester and another guy are alleged to have done. And to give you an idea of what kind of people are involved in these skinhead groups, I think the biggest one, the USAS, United Society of Aryan Skins, they were founded by a guy named Davis. Davis would tell his young proteges, I don't want you guys using drugs, so give me all your commissary so you won't be tempted. And he, of course, would go use drugs with the commissary. And then when his gang got greenlit by the AB and started getting by the Penis, he went into protective custody, leaving all his guys in danger. He was eventually released, and according to Powder, a former Peni who's dropped out and likes to tell stories on a channel called Stories Written by a Current Prisoner on YouTube, which generally sound fairly believable, he died of an OD recently. So that's the state of the 16-person California federal AB indictment. 13 down one way or another, 3 to go, and they're at each other's throats. Who needs friends? Al Profit, American Dope.
Investigators took 5 years to document how the criminal network used contraband cell phones to send out their orders, with prison officials in the dark.
How could they get phones? How could this happen? Phones and contraband are an ever challenging issue within our prison system.